again. I'm back for the second night running. Tonight I am going to be having a chat with Camille, who is based in California. We're going to talk about donor-conceived children and how it feels having a donor-conceived child, and a bit more about the process and our thoughts and considerations when raising our donor-conceived children. And I've had a lot of messages today from people saying that they're looking forward to this because they're contemplating donor conception wherever you are in the world. I know it's lunchtime for those in California. It's evening in the UK, so thank you so much for joining. Camille will be joining in a second. Let's see if she's here. If you, obviously this is just our personal journeys, but if you have any questions for us around choosing a donor or considerations, then please fire away, because it's such a big topic and it's so useful to hear from, well, I found, to hear from people who have been there themselves when selecting a donor and thinking about the considerations. So please do send in any questions. In fact, if you have any questions also waiting for them to join, please shoot them over. I'm sure many of you may know joining, but I have 3 young donor sperm conceived children. Camille has an egg donor conceived son. So we will talk a bit about that. I did a webinar last week on donor conception, and there were a lot of questions asked. So it's obviously a huge topic that resonates with a lot of people. And I don't know, people watching, are you looking at sperm donation, egg donation, embryo donation? Let me know what your story is. She should be here in a sec. I think it's going to be 12 o'clock for her. It's later here. Okay, let's see. Thanks, please bear with me. And I think one of the topics that we're also going to cover is obviously starting that conversation with our children. And I'm going to talk a bit about the books that I've been using to talk to my children. I actually read one of them this evening. I think my twins are still too young, but it's interesting to start that conversation because, oh, there she is. I've done it much more with my oldest daughter. Should connect in a second. Ah. Good evening, or hello.
I'm gonna turn this. Let me flip this around.
You're sideways. Good luck.
There we go.
How are you?
Hi. Good. How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks.
Nice to virtually meet you.
I know. You know, when you speak to someone over messaging, and then it's nice to actually put a name to a face.
Yeah.
I have just sort of given a brief introduction. My followers know that I have 3 very young sperm donor conceived children because my husband's infertile. But I'd love you to introduce yourself and talk about your journey a bit, and then we can talk a bit about your son and the conversations that we're going to start having, or I'm already having, with our children, and answering any questions.
How old are your kids?
I have a daughter who is 4 in February, and then boy-girl twins who are 2.
Wow.
And they're really naughty.
Super mom. Oh,
so tell us your story.
So, do you want the long or the short version of it? I mean, I'll just give a quick. So basically, I'm an actress in Los Angeles, and that brings a lot of issues for me. Anyways, I was always feeling like if I stopped the ball rolling, that I wouldn't, they wouldn't hire me. If I got pregnant, they wouldn't hire me. So I always put pregnancy on the back burner. And what sucks is that I was married to my husband for a lot of years before we actually started trying. So, career was always first. And when we started to try, I was 37.
Okay.
And never even once thought that my fertility would have been the way that it was. I thought, I'm Latin, I can produce many babies, I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And it turned out that I had advanced diminished ovarian reserve, and which, for anybody out there that's listening, basically 37 is not the best age to start, but a lot of women can get pregnant at that age. But my ovaries were that of a 50-year-old.
Did you have any kind of testing done in your 20s or in your early 30s?
Nope, nothing.
Yeah. Do you think that there should be better education about that so people can be informed?
Yes, 100%. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm speaking out is to, I don't want to scare women, and I know that my journey is definitely not going to be everyone's journey. And I think that's part of the problem too, is a lot of women have that conception, that notion that, oh, well, that's not going to happen to me.
I know.
Because that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not going to be my story. And, 5 years later, that was my story. I couldn't get pregnant naturally. We went to one IVF doctor after another, and we did the IUI route. We did 5 IVFs. I transferred over 20 embryos of
wow.
my own that looked great. They looked good, which was weird. But none of them.
That's a lot to go through.
A lot.
All those negative tests.
Yeah. And even besides that, I, in those 5 years, was actually never off hormones because my doctor, who I love, he put me on, because I would be shooting away from my husband, and he would put me on hormones. He's like, you just take the hormones and we'll fly your husband in when it's time to do the deed. So he wanted my body to still be prepped because I didn't have time to do IVF.
Yeah. So
constantly on hormones. So I think the silver lining in this is when I actually did get pregnant, the hormones, my pregnancy hormones, I was like, well, this is nothing. I was so happy. I had the best pregnancy.
So when did you decide to call it a day trying with your own eggs and move on to donor conception?
So it was basically decided for me after the 5th time. I still wasn't ready to say no, because they keep on saying to you that, you do only need one. And I just kept on having that thought, like, gosh, well, what if the next one is the one and we're not going to take that chance? So I told my husband, as long as we have the finances and I can mentally wrap my brain around this, I got to do it again. And also, for those of you who know, and this is something that I'm going to bring up at another time, but our insurance out here does not cover IVF. So all of this was done by, Robbie Peter to pay Paul. I was like, Mom, Dad, can you pay for this one? Who wants to pay for this one? Anybody wants to donate money? It was,
and no one wants to say no.
It's super expensive. But we were like, one more shot. Let's just do it one more time and see what happens. And I went to the day that we were supposed to start, you do a baseline test to see where everything's at before you start your shots. And the doctor that saw me was like, when are you starting your protocol? I said, tonight. And he said, oh, I wouldn't waste your money. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, I don't see any follicles. And I was like, keep on looking. There's got to be follicles. Like, I've never not had any follicles. And he was like, well, your blood result came back. My AMH levels, for those of you who know, are a pretty good barometer as to how many eggs we're going to have. My AMH levels were 0.1.
Were they?
So, and when I started, it was 0.5, which is not great, but, it was still a chance.
I actually tested my AMH levels when we went through IVF when I was 30. And then I was intrigued because of what I'm doing now to test them again at 35. Yeah. And they have dropped so much in the last 5 years. I couldn't believe it.
Every 6 months, apparently, they change. So I always say to women who are, keep on checking, because just because you checked 2 years ago, check again, because they change really fast. So
you do think that. You think, well, I'm not going to be that statistic. It's not going to be me.
Right. Exactly.
So at that point, did he say, I think you should look at donor eggs?
Well, that wasn't my doctor. It was an outside clinic, because the doctor that I was using at that time was New York.
Okay.
I didn't need him to tell me that. And I wasn't going to be going with that doctor anymore after this, because he was like, oh, he blew smoke. like just told me all of these things and put me on a large protocol and just said, I 100% can get you pregnant. So when this happened, I was really struggling prior to this. And I knew, I was like, I needed something to just hit me. Otherwise I wasn't going to stop. And there was nothing more clear than this doctor telling me, you have no follicles. So the decision was made for me. And
how was that news for you? How did you kind of digest that
process? Oh, it was really difficult. It was, I mean, nothing that I'd ever experienced before. And you know, I had been preparing myself for this moment, but I think when you hear that, it's just like more than a punch to the gut. It's like somebody just like takes the wind out of you, you know. It is a loss. It's, you know, a loss of my ideas of what I thought my future was going to be.
Did your husband feel the same way?
Yeah. So it's interesting because, you know, we had many conversations and I did feel alone in this. This had been happening. So to get to this point, I think was, I feel like he was more prepared for it than I was. Mm-hmm. But getting to this point, we had, you know, many conversations and arguments. You know, this is a lot to deal with.
Yeah.
One of the arguments was, I was like, you don't know what it feels like. You know, this is me. And he said, well, gosh, don't you think that I haven't envisioned what our children would look like what a child with me and you would look like? Do you think my idea for the future was to have, you know, what a genetic child with somebody else? Like, and that really hit me to hear him say that. I was like, oh, that's right. It's not just me who has this vision. He also had this vision. So,
because I had family members kind of, I mean, everyone was being so supportive, but I would get comments like, you don't understand, you know, what your husband's going through. And it's like, I don't, but I'm living it too. And this is my child's future that we're talking about as well.
Right.
It's definitely a joint venture. So actually there are huge knock-on effects to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I think I needed to hear him say that because I didn't get it. You know, I was taking on the burden all by myself, and he was trying, but I didn't want it. I didn't want him. You know, I was angry. I was angry for so many reasons, and I was also angry at him. So why did you wait so long? Why weren't you ready earlier? You know, like all of these things would come out, but yeah. And I think, like you were saying, this is something that could really, I feel like this could also tear couples apart, and to be really transparent and open with your partner about this, and this is, like you said, a venture for the two of you together, and it's not something to be done alone.
But I think it's making it stronger as well, going through something like this.
Totally. And it definitely did.
Mm-hmm. So after that, how did you pick your donor?
It was a very long process. I went on a million different sites trying to find someone, my doppelganger, who looked like me. By accident, I stumbled on this one place, which I will not mention because it's super untrustworthy. Was a very, you know, this industry is also a money-making industry for a lot of people, and there can be a lot of sharks out there. And I happened to land on this one site where she was just all about money and totally took me for a huge ride. But at the end of it, I do have my baby. So yeah, I think going through, especially in the United States, I don't know the protocol in England, but in the United States, you know, really do your research and find trusted agencies out there. Yeah, so I eventually,
between ID release and non-ID release.
We did none. although this is how sloppy they were. I know who my donor is because they released her medical records without taking her name off.
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm. That's how sloppy they are. So, yeah, so I know who she is. I know everything about her. I mean, she's a beautiful young lady who has a little boy.
So you, obviously with that information, you're going to research it a bit, right?
I don't know if, I don't know. It's a conversation.
You don't know if you want to.
Yeah, it's a conversation to have. I just don't, because we had such a tumultuous ending with this agency, it kind of scares me to, yeah. I think I don't know if I think she could be a nice girl, but I don't know. We don't know. I don't know.
Don't necessarily want to open up that
kind
of world.
Yeah.
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 And so, tell me more about your son. So how old is he, Morrison?
Yeah, he's actually 13 months already. I'm like, what is happening? He's 13 months and very precocious and naughty as well. My husband's British, by the way.
So, okay, I didn't know that.
He's very cheeky. So for all you Brits out there, I know the term. He's very cheeky. But he is. He's such a happy, fun kid. So we're just enjoying every moment of him right now.
Good. And when he was born, what were the feelings like?
I was just saying, I wrote a post the other day that if somebody would have told me how much I would have loved this kid when going through the process in the beginning, I never would have believed them. And I think I feel really lucky that I was able to go through the process of carrying him, which I know not a lot of women are able to do that. But I'm just happy that I was able to have that gift given to me. And then just having him in my arms was just so surreal. I feel like it didn't even hit me until like you have those quiet moments with him where I was breastfeeding him or just burping him at like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning. Just realizing like, well, this is my little boy. Like, this is amazing. Just such a gift and such a blessing. It's hard to put into words sometimes because I get so emotional with it. Still, like last night I was holding him and he's like so big now. I was just like, oh my gosh, how are you so big? And he's like, every part of him is mine. Do you know what I mean? And I never would have thought that in the beginning. Never. I had all of those fears, which I'm sure you, like your husband, and you know, it's kind of like the fears.
It's the unknown, isn't it? I mean, no one knows what their child is going to look like or be like. But when you've used a donor, and you know, you may have seen childhood photos. I don't know I don't know what you saw, but it's hard to imagine. And so when I was carrying our children, it was kind of like, I really don't know what they're going to be like. And all of that uncertainty totally disappeared as soon as they were born. And donor conception isn't for everyone. Right. But there are other options out there if you are suffering from the loss of your genetics. And that's why it's interesting to have these conversations. Have you thought about how you're going to talk to him?
I definitely want to start doing it now. We are still on the fence about a couple of things because he does have a genetic half brother. So, you know, I feel like it's important for him to see what he looks like. And I think it's important for him to see what the donor looks like as well. So we're still undecided. I love, though, having this conversation with you to see where you are at with it, because you're a year ahead. A couple of years ahead now. So I know that we want to, but we haven't yet.
So there are some amazing books out there, and you can get different ones, whether it's embryo donation, egg donation, sperm donation. Obviously we've got the sperm donation ones, but I've suddenly got to a point where my eldest daughter is 3, nearly 4, and the twins are 2, and I've just realized that I've spent so long talking to her about it. I need to start focusing on telling the twins. And sometimes I'll just randomly say things to her because I read the story at night, or my husband does, and he doesn't always tell me he's going to read it to her. I just overhear him saying, talking about it, and I think, oh, that's such a lovely moment that he feels comfortable doing that, because he sometimes finds it hard, and not with the children, but bringing up that conversation. When's the right time?
Right.
But she started to know, Mummy and Daddy, the language we use is, Mummy and Daddy wanted to have a baby like you and the twins so much, and we couldn't. And the months went by, and we went to see doctor after doctor and had test after test. I read it to the twins tonight, and my son, there's a picture of an elephant with an injection in the bottom.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen that. I think I have that book. Is it like a blue, purple elephant?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Was Mummy's tummy big? And so, and there's a picture of being pricked in the bum, and my son's like, ouchie, Mummy, ouchie. And I'm like, yeah, it was ouchie. Really was. So that we had test after test, and for us it's saying, Daddy didn't have sperm, but sperm's a big word, so they use other words and terminology. And then we talk about going on a plane, which they find exciting because we went to America, and then we talk about the doctor helping, and because of what I'm doing now, my kids have met the doctor that we had, which is so lovely, because my eldest said to her, "Thank you for making us."
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, it's that kind of language. And then I say, the donors in America, a very kind man, helped us have a baby. But of course, at this point, they obviously don't realize what that means. And I guess my anxieties, I don't really have many anxieties at the moment, but with donor sperm, there's more likelihood of having more half siblings.
Right.
And not knowing that amount is a bit scary.
Right. So how do you feel about the idea of donor siblings and having them potentially meeting them or knowing them? Because that's the thing that I see with like the whole 23andMe, and they're eventually going to take these genetic, I mean, now a lot of people take them now. So I'm sure 10, 15, 20 years from now, they're going to probably take them and know that they have half siblings out there.
Yeah, I think that, well, we've signed them up to a sibling registry so that if they want to contact people when they're 18, they can.
Oh, that's great.
I think that we're just going to take each year as it comes and give them the information we can, and just say, we're behind your decision, whatever you want to do. And that's the other thing, because there's 3 of them, I kind of know that they might have different opinions on it, and that's okay.
Right. And they're all 3 from
I hope they don't mind what I'm doing in this space. And vocalizing it. I hope that they find that reassuring in some ways, that it's...
I thought I heard my child.
Don't worry. That it's something to be comfortable and not ashamed about. That's what I want them to realize. So if we can support them with meeting them if they want to, then absolutely we'll do it. Just don't know where they're all going to be located or how many there will be. But I do know from seeing our donors, I do know from looking at the donor registry so far, I think there's about 11 registered half siblings, very girl heavy. So the donor produces girls.
Wow.
Like 2 boys and, I don't know, 9 girls, something like that.
That's crazy. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you guys are all from the same donor, right? All your children?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. I mean, do you want to extend your family?
If I was younger, I would say yes. Now that I'm working, I'm a brand ambassador to Tulip Fertility, and I still have the opportunity to go on there and look at donors. And my process for me was it took so long to find a person. And I don't know if it's because it's the second time around, but I found so many girls.
Really?
And I found one. Mm-hmm. And for me, I thought it was really difficult because of my ethnic background. There aren't a lot of donors that are Cuban or Puerto Rican, or Cuban and Puerto Rican. Mm-hmm. And I found a girl. And I was like, oh my gosh, talking to my husband, like, should we do this again? What should we do? She just seemed like such an amazing woman too, and she's a nurse, and we really thought it through, and I just think I don't think we can do it yet. It wouldn't be ready yet, and when I am ready, which would be like maybe in a year or two, I think I'll be too, for me, too old.
Yeah.
But I did start Foster a Dream for, you know, to help foster kids. So we've definitely talked about our second one coming from the foster care system.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I had a reader write an article about that actually.
And
really? How her situation changed overnight. She's called Overnight Mama.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's very inspirational.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the month too. I don't know if it is the month over there, but here in November, it's Adoption Awareness Month. Yeah. So yeah, like we were saying earlier, if you want to be a mom, there's so many different ways. Like donor conception isn't for everyone. And there are so many children out there. You know, adoption also is very expensive. Yeah. But fostering, foster to adopt is a long emotional process, but it's free. Yeah. So if you can't afford it and you really want a child, I think they pay you actually to take care of the children. So wow, the gift.
So what advice would you give to people who are contemplating egg donation and looking around?
My advice always is like when you're at the point of knowing, then to me it's like take a breath, because I think the major hard part is over. There's now the ticking time clock has stopped. You're frozen. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I didn't know if it's me that's frozen or you. Sorry. Yeah. Has it come back?
I have you frozen.
Oh, you froze before, so I'm sorry. I don't know what's going on. It's like I'm in the middle of London. How can the signal be bad? How can the Wi-Fi be bad?
And I'm literally right by my Wi-Fi box. Come on.
Anyway, we can hear you. We can hear, so that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so take a breath and, you know, just try to enjoy this process a little bit more. I think before this, there have been so many moments, you know, that have been hard and challenging and heartbreaking. And I think at this point, have a little bit of fun, you know, allow yourself to get lost in the looking for the girl and, or the man. But I think just have a little bit of fun, because this process has been so hard up until this point that it's exciting. You know, this should be the exciting part, and nerve-wracking as well, but it's also exciting. So try to indulge in that part.
I had a conversation with a reader last week, actually, because she was looking at donor conception and she wanted some advice about where to look and what to consider. And even from the conversation I had with her last week, where she was going through the grieving process, loss of genetics, to just yesterday messaging me saying, we found the donor, we now feel excited, was amazing to see that transition since I spoke to her at the weekend.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, because it is exciting. You can finally take the weight off of you for a second and, you know, enjoy what you've been missing.
Absolutely. Someone just asked about books to read. I do know of quite a few, so just DM me and I can send you some names. There are so many amazing ones out there. You Were Meant for Me is really good. And the one I just mentioned, which is about sperm donation. Any for eggs? You know?
Oh my God, I have so much.
I'm putting you on the spot. That's why I said message me, because then I'll have a thing.
Actually, a woman just sent me her book, which I haven't read yet because it just came in the mail yesterday, but I can't remember the title. Oh, you know what? DM me. I do have a few. But I just don't know them offhand right now.
That's fine. So tell me, what are you doing? You just mentioned, what are you doing as a brand ambassador for Tulip? Tell us a bit more. That was me.
So Tulip is an awesome, and it's all women who are behind this, and it's a platform where they have over 20,000 donors in one place. And if you've ever gone through this process, you know that you're literally online going from one donor agency to the next, and you know, scribbling notes on one page and then going to the next page, and it's just like it could be overwhelming. And what I found so great is that it's a subscription based, where you, and it's a pretty low cost. It's $99 a month, where you get access to over 20,000 donors, like I said, all over the country. And they have so many different options for you. You can go through any religion, ethnicity, race. I mean, the fun part for me was really going through and saying, okay, it's kind of like a formula, you know, like a science formula, where I'm going to try doing Puerto Rican, I'm going to try doing Christian, and I'm going to try doing this. And then you take one off and do another one and see which donors would pop up. But they also have, the team has such a wealth of knowledge and has been in the business for years, and they are all there to help you through this process. And they also have so many resources online as well. So it's definitely something that I stand behind 100%, and would have loved to have this when I was going through my process. Yeah, so I'm supporting them as a brand ambassador, and you know, getting awareness out there for Tulip. And also we have two 1-month subscriptions that I'm offering if anybody is out there and going through this and is at the stage where you want to find a donor.
In the US, right?
It's in the US, yes. But just like you, how you traveled, you can to UK if you want to travel to the US. And it does make it a little bit more challenging, but you did it. So
I did do it, yeah. And people do actually message me a lot about that as well, having IVF abroad. So if someone's interested in knowing more and taking up your kind offer of that free subscription, should they DM you?
Yeah, DM me. You can DM Tulip. It's at Tulip Fertility. You guys know I'm at Camille Guati. So DM me, DM Tulip, and we would love to offer too.
Okay, cool. And anyone watching, if you have any questions for Camille or me, then please send them over now, or you know, do feel free to DM them after. I'm excited to see your posts as things, you know, as life continues and you start these conversations, because I really enjoy speaking to people who are like a step ahead of my children, to ask questions like, what kind of things do they ask? How do they feel about it? And I think one of the biggest anxieties for me was, well, it still is, when they get to school, which is next year for my eldest. She's at nursery, but next year, will people think that she's different because of her talking about it? But, you know, my mum pointed out to me, which is, of course, what I know from what I do now, but families are created in so many different ways. A traditional family doesn't necessarily exist as it used to as much. No. So, you know, hopefully these things are going to be more commonplace.
I think so. And I feel like even though a lot of people aren't talking about it, there probably are a lot of children that will be in the classroom that will be the same situation. I mean, another reason for me to discuss this and be public about this is to make it normal for when Morrison goes to school, you know, so that it's not such a taboo subject. So I remember a long time ago when IVF was like, they called them test tube babies, and you know, and IVF still has a little bit of a taboo attached to it. You know, there's some women that are like, oh, well, I don't want to go down that road. And I'm like, okay, but there's nothing to be ashamed of if you have to.
That's why I love what you're doing, and, you know, raising a voice and awareness and being an ambassador and having open conversations about it. I think it helps move things forward, doesn't it, and make it more commonplace to be discussed.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm probably going to be looking you up. You're like, okay, what do I say now?
Yeah. Hey, message me. It's fine.
When he asks these questions.
Yeah, because whether it's eggs or sperm, it's still the same, or embryo donation or adoption, it's still the same conversations, isn't it?
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I don't know what it's like in London, but in in LA, it's a pretty liberal city where there's a lot of everything. You know, so I think kids in the classroom will be a pretty mixed bag.
Exactly.
So I feel like he'll feel one and he'll feel united with a bunch of kids. But I don't know, how's London in that sense? Is London a little bit more conservative, or?
I think it's getting there. I think it's getting there. I'll be able to tell you in a couple of years.
Yeah,
but
I mean, I know my mother-in-law was very surprised that I was so open about talking, and I was just like, well, of course, it's part of my story, you know, nothing to be ashamed of. But, and I know she didn't mean it in that way, but they're more private, I think.
Yeah, and I do know that, because, you know, sometimes people don't want to show their faces, which is absolutely fine. I totally understand that. And, you know, it doesn't mean that anyone is less brave because they're not sharing their story.
Exactly.
At all. It's not a measure of how, you know, how you're dealing with the situation. It's each to their own, isn't it?
Right. I mean, somebody once in an interview was trying to, I guess, get me to talk about if I felt upset that, you know, celebrities weren't speaking out about it. And twofold. Am I upset? I'm not upset, but do I wish that they would speak out about the truth of their journey of fertility or infertility? I wish. But this is such a personal matter that you can't expect people to speak. You know, and
I've actually had like written an article about that on my site, and I think the general kind of consensus was that it's great for those stories to be shared, but sometimes, I'm not saying all, some celebrities, you know, there may have been a struggle, but you don't know the full scale of it. So therefore, and they don't necessarily need to say, but what it means is, going back to your point, people might be go into like a false sense of security that X celebrity had a baby at 45, therefore they can. Whereas we don't know whether there were egg donation was used.
Yeah, and that was, for me, I was like, oh gosh, you know, I was asked if I wanted to make an announcement, and I was like, I told my husband, I said, we need to speak about this because I don't feel right. And I kept, my whole IVF journey was private. Like, none of that was on Instagram. Nobody knew that I was even trying to get pregnant or struggling to get pregnant. So when I got pregnant, I just felt like it would be would be such a false story for me to go up and be like, oh, hey, I'm pregnant, and not let anybody know the struggle that came with my pregnancy. So I wanted to be transparent, and I wanted to tell people, like, hey, it's not always shiny. And half of those posts for motherhood and all these things that I did, it was kind of, you know, a little bit secret, was all about my fertility journey, and it took a long time to get here, and the road was not straight, and I don't want anybody to think that I got pregnant at 42 and so can you. I mean, you might be able to, but it's gonna be hard.
Totally. Yeah, and then people realize that they're not alone. They're not alone in the struggle. They're not alone in the same feelings and the decisions and all the apprehension and uncertainty.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on as my guest tonight. It was so nice to have a conversation with you, and no doubt we'll speak again soon.
Yes.
Thank you for those who have joined and watching it back. And, you know, if you do want to take advantage of looking at Tulip, then please feel free to message any of us.
Yes, and I don't know if I'm frozen, but I'm waiting.
I don't know. I'm sorry if it's my internet.
I don't know who's frozen, but thank you guys.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Bye.